Single dad, shamed for not having money to pay for his daughter's meal at a restaurant, but a millionaire saw everything and did something that shocked everyone. Rate my story from 0 to 10 in the comments. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. Sweat dripped from the single dad's forehead as his trembling hands rummaged through the pockets of his worn jeans, desperately searching for any loose change that might cover the simple dish he had ordered for his daughter. The little 4-year-old girl, with her golden curls and doll-like eyes, innocently played with the paper napkins, oblivious to the humiliation her father was enduring in that upscale Manhattan restaurant. The waiter, a middle-aged man with a forced smile and condescending gaze, impatiently tapped his fingers on the counter as he watched the embarrassing scene unfold. The establishment, frequented by the city's elite, wasn't used to serving customers like the 30-something man, whose movie star good looks contrasted starkly with his plain clothes and the evident weariness on his face. "Sir, I need prepayment," the waiter said in an authoritarian tone, loud enough for other patrons in the dining room to hear. "It's house policy for certain situations." The single dad felt his face flush with shame. His savings had been spent on his daughter's medication the previous week, and the little money he had earned from his delivery job wouldn't even cover the kid's meal he had promised the girl. He had brought her there as a desperate attempt to provide a moment of joy after weeks of eating just bread and milk at home. "Daddy, I'm hungry," the child mumbled, tugging at the sleeve of his threadbare shirt. Across the elegant dining room, a 30-year-old woman observed the entire scene with growing indignation. She was the type of person who turned heads wherever she went, silky hair cascading over her shoulders, a designer dress that cost more than most people earned in a month, and a confident demeanor that betrayed years of privilege. The owner of a business empire inherited from her family, she was accustomed to solving problems with money, but something about this situation touched her differently. Without a second thought, she rose from her table and strode purposefully toward the father and daughter. The entire room seemed to pause as the elegant woman approached the modest table. "Excuse me," she said, addressing the waiter directly with natural authority. "I'll take care of this family's meal." The single dad looked up, surprised and mortified. "No, ma'am, I can't accept." "Please," she interrupted gently but firmly. "Let me do this." She turned to the little girl, who was watching her with childlike curiosity. "What's your favorite dish, sweetie?" The child smiled shyly. "I like mac and cheese." "Then you shall have the best mac and cheese in this city," the woman replied, sitting down at their table without asking permission. "And maybe some ice cream for dessert?" The little girl's eyes lit up like stars, while her father struggled between gratitude and humiliation. Never in his 30 years had he felt so small and at the same time so touched by the kindness of a stranger. "I don't know how to thank you," he murmured, avoiding eye contact with the woman who radiated power and elegance. "There's no need to thank me," she replied, studying his face intently. There was something about those tired eyes that intrigued her, an inner strength that contrasted with his vulnerable situation. "What's your daughter's name?" "She's my little princess," he replied, stroking the girl's hair with infinite tenderness. During the meal, the woman learned that the man was working 3 different jobs just to afford the rent on a small apartment and his daughter's basic needs. He had lost everything when his business failed 2 years earlier, and his ex-wife had abandoned him, taking with her all the savings they had built together. The conversation flowed naturally, despite the initial tension. She realized that, behind the desperate circumstances, there was an intelligent, hard-working man who was completely devoted to his daughter. He, in turn, was surprised to find that such a powerful, wealthy woman could be genuinely interested in his simple stories about fatherhood and the daily challenges. When it was time to say goodbye, she hesitated before speaking. "I own several businesses. Maybe I could offer you a better job." His face immediately closed off. "Thank you for the meal, but I don't accept charity." "It wouldn't be charity," she insisted. "You seem like a competent person." "Mom, I appreciate your kindness, but I can't mix gratitude with work. That wouldn't be fair to either of us." She admired his wounded dignity, even knowing that he was refusing an opportunity that could change his life. There was something attractive about his masculine pride, an inner strength that intrigued her deeply. In the following days, she couldn't get the image of the dedicated father and his adorable daughter out of her mind. For the first time in years, someone had refused her help, and it unsettled her. She was used to solving everything with money and influence, but the man had touched something deeper, something she didn't even know existed within herself. 3 days later, she returned to the same restaurant, hoping to find them again. To her disappointment, they didn't show up, but she wouldn't give up easily. There was something about those tired eyes that called her back, a connection she couldn't explain or ignore. For 2 weeks, the businesswoman discreetly visited different locations around the city where she thought she might find the father and daughter again. Public parks, food courts in popular malls, even some simpler restaurants in the neighborhood. Her obsessive search began to intrigue even her private driver, who didn't understand why his boss had abandoned her routine of lunches at exclusive clubs to roam places she had never frequented before. The answer came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when she finally spotted them in Central Park. The single dad was pushing his daughter on the swing set as the light rain dampened their dark hair. He didn't have money to pay for expensive activities, so the free park had become the girls' private playground. The businesswoman watched from a distance for a few minutes, touched by the dedication with which he played with the child, making funny voices and inventing stories to make her laugh. When she approached, he recognized her immediately, and his face tightened in a mix of surprise and discomfort. The little girl, on the other hand, ran towards her with a radiant smile. "It's the pretty lady from the restaurant," the child exclaimed, clinging to her legs without any shyness. "Hello, princess," the woman replied, crouching down to the girl's level. "Do you always come to this park?" The father approached slowly, clearly embarrassed by the situation. "Ma'am, Please just call me by what I am," she interrupted him. "I'm just someone who would like to get to know you better." Over the next 40 minutes, while the girl played on the park equipment, they talked about everyday things. She learned that he had owned a small graphic design company that had gone bankrupt due to financial complications he couldn't fully explain. The bankruptcy had left him indebted and without prospects, forcing him to accept any available job to support his daughter. "My ex-wife said I was a loser," he confessed, watching his daughter climb on the slide. "That she deserved someone who could give her luxury and security. When she left me, she took everything we had saved for emergencies, said it was compensation for the years wasted with me." The businesswoman felt an unexpected anger surge in her chest. "People who truly love don't abandon you in difficult times," she said, surprised by the intensity in her own voice. He looked at her curiously. "Or what about you? A woman like you must have everything in life." "Money doesn't buy everything," she replied vaguely, averting her gaze. "Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us the most." In the following meetings, which became a weekly routine in the park, a genuine connection began to form between them. She learned that he called himself the princess's dad and discovered details about his daily struggle, waking up at 5 in the morning to work as a delivery driver, then rushing to his afternoon shift at a department store and still doing freelance design work during the early morning hours to supplement his income. He, in turn, realized that behind the facade of power there was a lonely woman who spoke about business with passion but avoided talking about family or personal relationships. She never mentioned parents, siblings, or a partner, and he began to suspect that all that wealth came with a high emotional price. The tension between them grew with each meeting. Small gestures took on greater significance. When she helped push the girl's swing, their hands almost touched. When he talked about his frustrated dreams, she listened with an intensity that made his heart race. When the child asked the pretty lady to stay for dinner, both felt an electric current in the air. But the social barrier between them seemed insurmountable. He drove an old, noisy car, while she arrived in luxury vehicles that cost more than he would earn in 10 years. She wore clothes that could pay his rent for months, while he wore the same 3 shirts during the week, carefully washed and ironed to maintain his dignity. The first major turning point came on a rainy Thursday, when she arrived at the park, visibly shaken. Her eyes were red, and for the first time he saw her vulnerable. "What happened?" he asked, genuinely concerned. "My mother," she murmured, sitting on the wet bench without caring about her expensive dress. "She told me today that she was responsible for destroying several small businesses in recent years. She said it as if it were an accomplishment, something to be proud of." The single dad felt a chill in his stomach. "What kind of businesses?" "Small family businesses mostly. She uses aggressive business tactics to eliminate them from the market and then expand our businesses in the same sectors." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I never knew the details. I always thought our success was just the result of hard work." He remained silent, processing the information. A part of his mind began to make dangerous connections, remembering how his company had been mysteriously sabotaged by competitors who appeared out of nowhere with prices impossible to compete with. "Did she mention the type of company?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "Graphic design, mainly. Small agencies that served the downtown area." The world seemed to stop around him. His company was exactly in the downtown area, and the type of sabotage he had suffered fit perfectly with what she had just described. But he couldn't accuse without proof, and a part of him didn't want to believe that the woman he was falling in love with could be connected to his ruin. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing his sudden paleness. "I'm fine," he lied, forcing a smile as his daughter ran towards them. That night, after putting the girl to sleep, he spent hours on the internet researching the woman's company. What he discovered left him in a state of shock. Her mother had indeed destroyed dozens of small businesses, including 3 graphic design companies in the downtown area in the past 5 years. One of them had a name he recognized immediately. It was the company that had stolen his main clients by offering services at half price, forcing him into bankruptcy. She didn't know. He was sure she didn't know, but that made everything even more complicated and painful. For 3 weeks, the single dad carried the weight of that discovery like a stone in his chest. Every meeting in the park became a silent torture, where he had to pretend normalcy while watching the woman he had fallen in love with, knowing that her family was responsible for his ruin. She noticed his change in behavior, the drier answers, the distant look, but interpreted it as disinterest or fatigue from overwork. The sexual tension between them had intensified dangerously. When she helped push his daughter's swing, their bodies were dangerously close, and he smelled the expensive perfume she wore, mixed with his own emotional turmoil. When she laughed at the girl's antics, he lost himself watching her lips and imagining what it would be like to kiss her, before bitterly remembering who she really was. The situation became even more complicated when she finally mustered the courage to make a more direct invitation. "Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow?" she asked on a Friday afternoon after the girl had fallen asleep in her arms on the park bench. "I know a discreet place where we can talk more privately." He looked at her for a long moment, torn between the desire to accept and the anger growing inside him. "I don't think it's a good idea." "Why not?" she insisted, moving closer to him on the bench. "I feel like there's something special happening between us." "Don't you feel it?" His question was direct and full of bitterness. "Would you tell me the truth about how your family made its fortune?" She blinked, surprised by the change of subject. "My family has always been successful in business." "Why are you asking this?" "Successful or ruthless?" he retorted, his tone growing colder. "There's a difference between competing fairly and destroying innocent people." Her face tightened. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about small business owners who lost everything because your mother decided they were inconvenient obstacles." He stood up, picking up his sleeping daughter. "People like me." The revelation fell like a thunderbolt between them. She froze, processing what he had said as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. His company, the mysterious bankruptcy, the area where he worked. It all made sense now. "You think I knew?" she murmured, standing up as well. "I don't know what to think," he replied, adjusting his daughter in his arms. "I only know that while your family was accumulating more wealth, I lost everything I had built." That night, she couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, she actively questioned her family's business practices, requesting detailed reports on acquisitions and expansions over the past 5 years. What she discovered made her nauseous. Her mother had indeed orchestrated the destruction of dozens of small businesses using tactics that bordered on illegal. His company was on the list. 2 days later, she sought him out at his job as a delivery driver. She waited outside the commercial establishment until his shift ended, determined to clear everything up. "I didn't know," were the first words she said when he saw her. "I swear on everything, I didn't know what my mother was doing." He stopped walking towards his beat-up car. "And now that you know, now I want to make amends for the harm that was done." She approached, her eyes shining with determination. "Let me help you rebuild your company. I have resources, connections." "With the money that came from my ruin?" he interrupted, his voice laced with bitter irony. "What kind of justice is that?" The discussion intensified as she insisted that they could overcome it together. He argued that he couldn't build a relationship on the wreckage of his previous life, especially when she represented exactly the type of person who had always oppressed him. "You're not your mother," she insisted, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "And you're not just any woman," he retorted. "You're the heiress to an empire built on the suffering of people like me." "How can I forget that?" The conversation was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of an elegant woman in her mid-30s who stepped out of a luxury car with a determined expression. It was his ex-wife, looking more beautiful and well-dressed than ever, clearly thriving in her new life. "I need to talk to you," she said, completely ignoring the businesswoman. "It's about our daughter." His world seemed to crumble again. "What do you want?" "I want custody of her." The ex-wife smiled coldly. "My new husband can offer her a life you could never provide. Private schools, designer clothes, vacations, a promising future." "You abandoned me," he said, his voice trembling with suppressed anger. "You abandoned our daughter. You can't just come back and demand to take her." "I can, and I will." She pulled some papers from her expensive purse. "I've already filed the court petition. A little girl needs financial stability, not a father who can barely pay the bills." The businesswoman, who had observed the entire scene in silence, stepped forward. "Emotional stability is more important than money." The ex-wife scanned her up and down with disdain. "And who are you to comment on our family?" "Someone who genuinely cares about them," she replied, surprising even the single dad with the firmness in her voice. "If you care so much," the ex-wife retorted with a malicious smile, "maybe you should use your influence to help him. Because as things stand, any judge will see that a 4-year-old deserves better than a tiny apartment and a father who works all day." After the ex-wife left, leaving the legal papers with him, a heavy silence settled between the two. He stared at the documents with a defeated expression, while she struggled internally between the desire to help and the fear that any gesture would be interpreted as guilt or pity. "Let me help you with the lawyers," she said finally. "I have the best in the country working for my company." "And then?" he asked, raising his eyes to her. "After you solve this problem with your money, what happens to us? Do I remain eternally indebted to the family that destroyed my life?" "This has nothing to do with what happened before," she protested. "It has everything to do with it," he replied, putting the papers in his pocket. "Don't you understand? I can't accept your help because it means admitting that I am inferior, that I need the charity of those who destroyed me to get my own daughter back." Their farewell that afternoon was fraught with bitterness and unrequited desire. She left knowing that she loved him, but that he could never accept her love as long as the circumstances remained that way. He was left knowing that he had lost the two most important things in his life: the woman he had fallen in love with, and, possibly, his daughter. 2 weeks had passed since their last tense encounter. The single dad had hired a public defender to fight for custody of his daughter as he faced the most difficult battle of his life. The days dragged on between preliminary hearings, legal paperwork, and the constant anguish of possibly losing the only thing that truly mattered to him. The businesswoman, in turn, had immersed herself obsessively in work, trying to find ways to repair the damage caused by her mother without him knowing of her involvement. The decisive turning point came on a Thursday afternoon when the little 4-year-old girl, playing in the modest apartment while her father prepared a simple snack, overheard a phone conversation that would change everything. On the other side of the thin wall, the neighbor was talking loudly on the phone about that rich woman who paid a fortune for the ex-wife of the guy from the apartment next door to cause problems. With the innocent curiosity of children, she pressed her ear to the wall and listened to fragments of the conversation. The old lady offered a lot of money for her to come back and destroy the daughter's happiness, said she couldn't let the girl get involved with poor people, threatened to cut off the inheritance if she didn't stop the relationship. When her father asked why she was so quiet, the girl, with all her childish sincerity, repeated what she had heard. "Daddy, the neighbor was saying that a rich lady gave money to Mommy to fight with you. She said the pretty lady's grandma doesn't want her to like you." The world seemed to stop for him. The pieces finally fell into place in a devastating way. The businesswoman's mother had not only destroyed his company, but had also orchestrated the return of his ex-wife to separate them and maintain control over her daughter. The ex-wife, motivated by greed, had accepted the deal to blackmail and manipulate the custody situation. That same night, he tried to call the businesswoman several times, but she didn't answer. He was determined to confront her with the truth and find out if she had knowledge of her mother's diabolical plan. Meanwhile, at the business family's mansion, an explosive confrontation was taking place. The businesswoman had finally mustered the courage to confront her mother after discovering documents that proved not only the destruction of the small businesses, but also recent payments to the ex-wife of the man she loved. "How could you do this?" she screamed, throwing the documents on the mahogany table of the luxurious office. "Wasn't it enough to destroy his life once?" The mother, a 60-year-old woman with an imposing appearance and a gaze as cold as steel, replied without showing any remorse, "I did what was necessary to protect our assets and our lineage. You can't get involved with these kinds of people." "What kind of people? An honest man who works hard to support his daughter? A loser who will leech off our wealth and drag you into mediocrity?" The mother stood up, walking towards the window overlooking the city. "I built this empire for you, not to be wasted on foolish romances." "You built this empire destroying innocent families," she retorted, tears of anger running down her face. "And now you're destroying my chance to be happy. Happiness is a luxury that people like us can't afford when there's so much at stake." The discussion intensified when the daughter threatened to take complete control of the companies and publicly expose all the illegal methods that her mother had used over the years. Finally, in a moment of uncontrolled fury, she declared that she would renounce her inheritance if necessary to be with the man she loved. "You've chosen your battle," the mother said coldly, "but don't expect me to make things easy for you." The next morning, the businesswoman finally returned his calls. They met at the same park where it had all begun, but this time the atmosphere was charged with revelations and settling of accounts. "My daughter told me about the conversation she overheard," he said as soon as she approached. "Your mother paid my ex-wife to separate us." She closed her eyes, confirming with a nod. "I found out last night. I confronted her, and now I know everything." "And what are you going to do?" "I'm taking complete control of the companies," she replied with determination. "I'm going to repair all the damage she caused, including what she did to you, and I'm going to make sure your ex-wife drops the custody battle." He studied her for a long moment. "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for nothing," she said softly. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because I love you." The words hung in the air between them, like a confession that they had both avoided for too long. He felt all the anger and resentment begin to dissolve before the sincerity in her eyes. "I love you too," he admitted finally. "But how can we build something together after everything that's happened?" "Starting from scratch," she replied, approaching him slowly. "Not as the heiress to an empire and the man who was harmed by it, but as two people who met and fell in love despite all the adversities." Their reconciliation was sealed with an intense and desperate kiss, charged with months of sexual and emotional tension. It was as if all the barriers had finally fallen, allowing their true feelings to flourish without obstacles. During the following months, she fulfilled all her promises. She used her influence and resources to ensure that his ex-wife gave up the custody battle, offering her financial compensation in exchange for the promise not to interfere further in the child's life. She also created a reparations fund for all the small businesses that had been harmed by her mother's tactics, including paying him a sufficient amount to rebuild his graphic design business. But he had learned to be independent in ways he never imagined possible. Instead of accepting the money directly, he proposed a business partnership where his design skills would complement some of her companies, creating a professional relationship based on merit and competence, not on charity or guilt. 6 months later, they returned to the same upscale restaurant where it had all begun. This time, he was dressed in a suit that he had bought with the money from his honest work, and she wore a simple dress that she had chosen specifically not to intimidate him. The little girl, now 4.5, played happily in her chair between them, finally secure in the love of both adults. "Do you remember the first time we were here?" she asked, observing the luxurious room around them. "How could I forget?" he replied, holding her hand over the table. "You saved our life that day." "Actually," she smiled, squeezing his fingers, "you saved mine. You showed me that there's something more valuable than money in the world." The little girl raised her eyes from the drawing she was making on the napkin. "Daddy, is the pretty lady going to live with us now?" They looked at each other and smiled. The future, for the first time in a long time, seemed full of genuine possibilities for happiness. They had proven that true love can overcome any social barrier, as long as people are willing to fight for it with honesty, dignity, and the courage to face their own fears and prejudices.